coming to get you, Barbara.
Ever played Skin the Cat?
Someone's in the back seat! Tell me where you are, John!
Wolfman's got narc!
Hi guys, my name is Barry and welcome back to the channel. Hello, my name is Barry. Welcome back to the channel. As you can see, I've got a special guest today. We've got Scott from the You Run podcast. How are you doing, Scott?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Thanks for accepting my invite to this live. Now, it's going to be mainly just us two talking about movies that scared us growing up as kids. Now, I just found out today that Scott's just a little bit older than me.
Yeah.
So we grew up in the same era. We obviously grew up in the same country as well. We're both from the UK. So we saw similar movies growing up. I'm assuming we'd not told each other what movies it scared us. So we're going to reveal that to each other in this live stream today. But just a little bit of a backstory about my growing up. And it's probably similar to you, Scott, but I'll let you say yours in a second. And that is, we would just go to our video stores when we were kids, maybe every Friday night, Saturday night, and as the kids always do, we always run to that horror section, look at all the front covers and go, yep, I want this, I want that, I want this. Our parents would hardly ever rent them for us, but we would see the front covers and then we would look out for them on TV if and when they came on the TV, and then we would obviously watch them over and over again. What was your experience with growing up?
Yeah, very similar. The video shop on a Friday and Saturday night, that was just a staple. I think every family done that. And the other one was you'd go round to cousins or friends and you'd have a sleepover and you'd be there and you'd go and raid the parents' VHS collection and go, oh, I saw that one in the video shop. Let's take that one before anyone notices. So yeah, I think like you, I was exposed to probably way more stuff than I should have been at a young age. But it was the 80s and 90s. That's just how it was.
But it is, yeah. I mean, we never had our laptops or iPads or anything like that. We would always just watch what was on TV, or maybe the 10 to 15 videos that we had on VHS that we would watch over and over again. So we had never had much options. So when there was a horror film sitting there, we were always going to watch it because that's all we had. And I don't know about you, but my parents always maybe went to our next door neighbours, friends, and had drinks in there and said, right, you guys just watch the movie and we'll be back in an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And we were like, okay, let's watch this movie. Let's watch that movie. So there was no filter. And because that was it, that was all we had, to be honest.
Yeah, we had a kid in our school who used to run almost like an underground railroad of horror movies. So he used to come in with 2 or 3 that he'd taken from his parents' collection. Right. And he'd loan them out, and then we'd watch them in secret and then bring them back, and then he'd swap them for other ones. And that happened when I was, I don't know, probably 10 or 11. There was this kid bringing in like 15 and 18 rated movies, and like you'd smuggle them home and watch them when you could. And that doesn't exist anymore.
No, well, we done the same. We had a few friends that came in with some dodgy looking VHSs, and luckily for me, I had a VHS player, and so did my parents. And what I would do is I would take my VHS over to theirs and plug them in together so I could record a VHS onto my other VHS. So if my friend gave me a loan of a horror film, I'd be like, right, put it in, record it as I'm watching it, take it out, and then that's me got a copy of it. Yeah. So that was the kind of early days of video piracy that we would always do. But he's recording it from somewhere else, and that person's recording it from somewhere else. And before you know it, you've got this really bad quality horror movie that you can just make out. But that was it. That was still your Friday and Saturday night sorted out.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to quickly go to the chat just to say hello to everyone, and then we'll start the show.
Yeah.
So we've got That Sounded Scary is in the chat. He said first. Welcome. Cynthia J is here. David Santa Carla is here. We've got Kiki Isa. Some of them are giving their examples, but we won't read them out yet just in case some of them are similar to ours. Okay. Because I guess people who are our age, like you said before the chat, Scott, we might have some crossovers in our top 10. When I say top 10, guys, I don't mean we're going to be doing a countdown from 10 to 1 or 1 to 10. They're in no particular order, unless Scott wants to do his in an order. Do you want to do yours in order?
No, I think they all traumatized me equally at
Yeah.
in different ways.
Yeah, that's the same with me. So I couldn't really rate them. So we're just going to go through them randomly. We'll do one each, one at a time, until we get to our 10th, and then that'll be it done. And if there's anyone in the chat that wants to give us their opinions on some of the ones that we've said, or some of the ones that you have that we haven't mentioned, then we can talk about them as well. All right.
Yeah.
So the first one for me, I'll go first if that's okay.
Yeah, no, fine. You fire away.
Yeah, the first one that traumatized me, I'm saying The Exorcist Part 3 from 1990.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that traumatized me greatly because I wasn't expecting the movie to be good. I don't even remember if I saw part one first or part two. Because I was young, I would watch any horror film, and watching The Exorcist 3, I don't even think I understood any of it when I was younger, because I must have been about 8 or 9 when I watched it. And I just remember watching it thinking, "God, this is really scary," when you see, um what do you call him, Brad Dourif's character with the eyes and stuff. That freaked me out. But obviously, have you seen The Exorcist 3?
I have, but not for a very long
Right.
time.
I don't know if you know this scene, but the scene that freaked me out was the scissor scene where the nurse is walking. You might have seen it. There's a nurse walking down a corridor, and all of a sudden, this person dressed in the white sheets got shears, and they're coming behind her so fast, like, and I was like, "Oh my God." And because it was on VHS, we would rewind it, and I would pause it, and I'd shout my sister in and say, "Kelly, come and see this." And she'd be like, what is it? And I would press play and say, watch. And she got a big fright. And I'm like, "Oh my God." And every time, it gets you every time. Even now, if I've watched a couple of years ago, and even now I prepare myself for that scene because I'm just like, "Whoa, that was freaky." There's so many other scenes in the film, but that's the most famous one. There's a scene where there's this old lady who's crawling on the ceiling as well.
Yes, that I remember.
Do you remember that? And she's looking
Yeah.
down on thingy, George. Oh, what's his name again? George someone. Um, that's freaky. So there's a couple of freaky moments in the movie. It's not an amazing film, and it's not even that scary. It's just certain moments in the film that scared me. And what made it worse is I had Cable Tel, which is now Virgin Media.
Yes.
I had Cable Tel back in 91, 92, and it was always advertised on Sky Movies. And one of the scenes that they showed in an advertisement was the shears scene.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, "Whoa, they're showing this at like 7 at night, 7 p.m." And I'm like, "I want to watch that." It was so good. But that was just the first one that kind of frightened me. And the impact that it had on me was quite big because I would always tell my friends, "Oh, you should watch this movie, The Exorcist 3, the shears scene." And that's all I would say to them is, "Watch the scene for the shears." And it kind of stuck with me for a couple of years because that was one of the ones that I really had nightmares over because of those certain moments in the film.
Yeah, and I've not seen it for a long time, and my memory of it is it's not a particularly good movie. But I remember the scene with the person on the ceiling and that
Yeah.
being really creepy. I didn't find The Exorcist until I was much older, though. So
Yeah.
The Exorcist is one that was carefully hidden by parents until I don't know, I was probably in my mid-teens when I first saw The Exorcist. So
Right.
the shock value for me, it was still there, but that trilogy didn't hit me the same way as it would have hit me had I found it 3 years earlier.
Yeah, I was kind of similar with the first one because my mum would say, "You're not watching The Exorcist," and I would say, "Okay." And then my friend gave me a loan of The Exorcist, and I put it on when my mum was out. And because I was so pumped up for being so scared, I wasn't. And I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah,
okay, that was disappointing." Obviously, I love it now because of what it is, but back in the day, I was kind of disappointed because I was expecting more.
yeah.
Oh,
And when we were younger, we were looking for different things in movies as well. We were looking for the jump scares. We were looking for the scenes that made us sort of turn away from the screen because it was particularly gory.
yeah.
And as you get older, you're not looking for the same
Hmm.
things anymore. I
I
don't
know.
think you are. I'm not, definitely.
David Diggs said George C. Scott. That's who it was in The Exorcist 3. His name completely lost me. I knew it was George, but yeah, George C. Scott. So first for you, Scott, what's your first one on your list?
I'm going to go with one of only two movies that were rated 18 or rated R.
Oh.
The first one that terrified me and gave me nightmares was RoboCop.
Right. Okay.
RoboCop scared me for a number of reasons. I know it's a weird one, but the scene where the guy gets covered in the toxic waste and he stumbles out into the road and gets hit by the car
Yeah.
and just liquefies and goes everywhere. That absolutely petrified me. And again, like you, we would sit there and we would go almost like frame by frame through it on the VHS to see how it was awful. That and the main guy, Clarence Boddicker, his character, like when he's trying to kill RoboCop or Murphy, is so ruthless, and it fills you with such a. It's the first movie I watched as a kid where I went, the baddie's going to win.
Yeah.
He's not going to win this, and that it really stuck with me. And I watched it recently with my eldest two boys, and they laughed pretty much all the way through, and I was like, oh.
Oh, well.
Really. But yeah, RoboCop was one that still now, even that scene when I watched it a couple of weeks ago, still made me go, oh, that's still bad.
Yeah, that's a freaky one. Well, I might as well go into my number two quickly then, because my number two is RoboCop from 1987, and that's quite good because that was my number two. Yeah, for all the reasons that you said, that's why it's on my list as well. I remember when I was younger, my mum's neighbour had RoboCop, and she wouldn't give us a loan of it, but she was like, come to my house and watch it. And we're like, okay. So me and my mum, just randomly, us two went over and we watched it. And the toxic waste scene was obviously the scariest part. And that's one of the reasons why I put that as the thumbnail, because I know that we both knew that was horrible.
Yeah.
So the toxic waste scene was probably the scariest scene in the film, but also what traumatized me was the beginning of the movie. See, when RoboCop was in the warehouse and all the guys were shooting at him, and then his body was like literally getting split apart. I was like, oh my God, what is happening? And I'm like, oh, I can't watch. And I must have been about, I don't know, 7, 8 at the time. And just watching this guy getting blown to pieces, I'm like, what the heck am I watching? But I loved it. I was like, Jesus Christ. So there was so many. I think that was one of those hard action sci-fi films of the 80s that there's quite a lot of them out there, like Total Recall. Total Recall was 1990, but around about that time, it's all those hard-hitting sci-fi horror movies, and I think RoboCop was just way up there, especially that melting scene before he gets squashed or splashed, just when you see him popping out, and he was was he trying to grab someone like RoboCop or something? He's like,
he ended up with everything over him, and sort of as he stands up, like all of his fingers are dripping, like where the skin's coming off. It's really, I have to say, still holds up fairly well today. Practical effect wise, looks great.
Absolutely, yeah. I think even that still image that I was looking at looks brilliant. Like the practical effects or the makeup and stuff, they don't even attempt that anymore because it takes too long. But that looks fantastic, and even to this day, 36 years later, you're like, wow, that holds up. And I'm assuming, again, I've not seen it for a couple of years or a few years, but I'm assuming that even the scenes that was traumatized us as kids probably still hold up today, unless you're obviously a teenager or a late teen. You probably look at it and go, oh, that's silly. But just growing up in that era and seeing it for the first time, you're like, wow, that's something I'm never going to forget, and we don't forget it.
No, because a lot of movies like that, when we first saw them, that was the first time a movie done something like that. Whereas now you've got such an endless amount of action movies and action horrors, and everyone's got a streaming device. And when my kids have watched, I don't know, 30 action movies, and then they watch that, they go, well,
yeah, I know.
It just kind of gets lost, and it's a shame, really.
I know, yeah, because it's a lost art, that kind of stuff, and that kind of movie is a lost art. Even movies, looking at the kind of hard action movies of the late 80s and stuff. Have you ever seen Hostage with Bruce Willis?
Yes.
2005. Even a film back then, watching it now, I watched it last night. Watching it now, I'm like, that's a really good film, and they don't make action films even like that anymore, and that's only 18 years ago. Action films have changed now into the kind of multiverse universe stuff, but that unique setting for a film is what helps movies, and especially RoboCop. the uniqueness of RoboCop was amazing, and you'll never get it again.
No, you won't. And it's the same as sort of the setting for the original Terminator. The setting for that movie it's the sort of the rundown Detroit. Really, it's a really dark place anyway. And then you drop something that's even scarier into that dark place. And movies today don't have that setup. They want to film in these beautiful locations and have people doing parkour from roof to roof and big explosions. And we never had that because they didn't have the money to do those kind of sets and those kind of locations. So we got something a lot grittier.
Which is good for us. We get to grow up in the gritty era. So that was my second one. So we'll move on to your second one now, Scott.
My second one is unbelievably was a PG, and it's the second Poltergeist 2 from 1986.
Oh, I've never even thought of that. Yeah, that's a good one.
I watched this. I was really young. I was probably 7 or 8 when I watched this, and I knew enough that Reverend Kane was a bad guy.
Yeah.
And he terrified me to the point that there was a guy who lived further down our road he was an old guy. He was a really nice guy. I would not walk past his house. I would cross the road. I saw him in a shop once, and we used to go and get like pick a mix from the shop, and I was in there getting pick a mix, and he come in, and I just dropped the bag and walked out and run down the road to my mum. And she's like, "He's a really nice man." I was like, No, he's not.
It reminds me of Home Alone, Ben the Shovel Slayer.
But yeah, that movie, the overall movie didn't scare me. It was just his character terrified me. And I know that actor, when I watch it now, he's an incredible performance that he gives. But yeah, watching it as a kid, it gave me nightmares. I avoided the really nice old gentleman who lived down our road. I avoided him like the plague.
That's a shame. Well, the guy who plays him, he was actually dying of cancer during filming it. So obviously that was probably going to be his last performance, but he was, I forgot all about that. He was absolutely frightening in Poltergeist 2. And I don't remember anything about Poltergeist 2, but one thing I do remember is him, because he scared the life out of me. Completely forgot about that. Even I've got the Blu-ray unopened. You see him on the back cover as well, just that drawn in face and the big teeth and the big scary eyes. I mean, he was a great character. Obviously, he would have been great in the first one as well if he was in that, but he was what was good about this one.
Yeah, he was, and he's really. I think what makes him scarier is he comes across for the most part of the movie as really friendly.
Yeah,
but it's that really friendliness that makes him. So he's really friendly, and then when he does turn and become nasty, it's that as a child made me fear kind old people. Because I had you're really nice to me now, but you might change. And it was a genuine fear for me when I was younger. I was, it traumatized me. I think that's quite a popular one for anyone who grew up.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
Dream Villain says Reverend Kane gave me the heebie-jeebies.
Yeah, me too.
Absolutely. You've also said, Dream Villain, hey Barry, how you doing? I just got in and missed the start. No, don't worry about it. We've only on to our second one just now. I said The Exorcist III and RoboCop, and Scott said RoboCop, and now he said Poltergeist 2. So that's what we're on to just now. For anyone else that's missed the start as well, that's what we're on to just now. You want to say anything else about Poltergeist 2 before we move on?
No, I think I'm ready to hear what you've got next.
Yeah, there's nothing spectacular, and there's I think half of mine are predictable, but maybe some of them you'll be like, oh, okay, never mind. So my third one, this one was, before I say it, it was the scariest movie of all time for me for absolutely years, and it probably still is possibly the scariest movie I've ever seen, and it's because of my fear of werewolves, and that is An American Werewolf in London.
Oh wow.
I watched that way too young, and it was one of those nights, and I still remember the night I watched it. My mum and dad went through to my next door neighbour, and they've got a daughter, and she came through at 2 hours, and it was me, my sister, and our friend Sarah, and the three of us watched An American Werewolf in London on Channel 4 or whatever it was, and every scene that he was transforming into a werewolf, or every scene that there was a werewolf, we were screaming. We were actually physically screaming, "Oh my God, ah!" The scene that scared me the most, though, was ironically the scene that you don't even see the werewolf, and that was at the moors at the start. When
Oh,
he's
okay. Yeah. When he's stalking, effectively.
Yeah, so when they just come out of the pub, the slaughtered lamb, and the people saying like stick to the roads, so they're walking on off the road, and then you can actually hear the werewolf circling them, and you can hear it growling as well, depending on how far away it was.
Yeah.
That frightened me. Honestly, there's a lane down at my street where I live just now. I grew up here as well, and it's about 250 steps from start to finish, but there's a fence at either side. So it's a lane with big tall fences. So you can't get across the left or right. You have to
Okay.
go all the way through or all the way back. And I remembered after I watched the movie, I would dream that I would get halfway down this lane and I'd see the werewolf at the end of the lane and it would start running towards me. And I'd have to try and run back. But you get the dreams where you're running slow,
Yeah.
and I just couldn't get back to where I was, and then I would wake up in sweats. So I dreamt about this film, and I dreamt about werewolves for years after seeing the movie. And even now, if I watch a werewolf movie, I think they're the scariest types of horror films because of my fear of werewolves, because of An American Werewolf in London. That's how much it traumatized me. I know I'm going on here, but the underground scene with the werewolf coming down in the underground
Yeah.
frightened me. The bit in the cinema at the end, absolutely frightening. The transformation scene when you see his hand get up and his mouth opening, honestly, scared myself right now.
How do you feel about watching it now? So if you were to put that on now, would you watch it and appreciate it for what it is, or would it still give you the same, I don't like this feeling?
I think I appreciate it now because I know that it's half comedy as well. I didn't understand the comedy parts of the film until now, until I was an adult. But it had too many scary scenes for me to even understand that it wasn't a comedy. I just thought it was an out and out horror. But watching it now, it's kind of slapstick comedy
Yeah.
slash horror. So I do appreciate it. It's still a great film. It holds up. The scary scenes do hold up. And when I do watch them now, it takes me back to when I was scared. So I've still got that little bit of fear in me, thinking that's quite scary because of how I felt when I first saw the movie. Have you seen it? I'm guessing.
Yeah. I love that movie purely more from just an admiration of the work that went into that movie, the amount of time and effort put into the transformations and the way it's shot. And I think everything about it just looks great.
Yeah.
It's an odd one. It's one of those movies. It's not a movie that I revisit very often. But if I'm flicking through and it's on a channel or on a streaming service somewhere, I'll give that a watch.
Yeah.
And there'll be chunks of it I'll skip because there's bits I want to watch. It's not a movie that I will watch the whole way through. But yeah, I really enjoy that film.
Yeah. There's some scenes that kind of drag a little bit.
Yeah.
But overall, I think the great parts about the film keep it great, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a great movie. It doesn't scare me though. I've got to say, werewolves are the ones that I'm probably least bothered by.
Yeah, that's just me.
I think for me, like whenever I saw werewolf movies, we always had dogs when I was growing up, and we always had big dogs. So we had a German Shepherd at one point that was twice the size of me. So when I'm looking at a werewolf, I'm sat there watching it with a German Shepherd going, you're kind of about the same size. This is so I think that's why. I think had I not had dogs growing up or a big dog growing up, I probably would have had a bit more. But for me, it was like, it's all right. Lady can take you down. It's fine.
Yeah, but that's a good thing about hearing other people's opinions on the films growing up, because you had a different experience. Even though we both saw the movie, we both had different experiences and feelings towards what we were scared of at the time, and that changes our outlook on these types of movies. It's funny when you see it like that.
Yeah, we all look at things very differently, and I find this amazing. Like whenever we have guests on or we talk to people, that you will view something in a certain way, and someone will say something and it completely flips your perspective. If you're like, wow, if I look at it like that, it's a completely different movie. And I love that. That's one of the reasons I love talking to people like
Yeah.
this, because it's so, everyone sees everything so differently.
Absolutely. So that was my number 3. What about you, Scott? What's your number 3?
My number 3 is another PG. In fact, most of mine are PG. So if anyone's expecting loads of 18 rated movies, they're not on my list. I was a sheltered child. Ghostbusters, the original Ghostbusters from 1984, and
Fair
one
enough.
scene in particular made me run from the room screaming, and it's when the librarian at the very, very beginning, the librarian that screams.
Yeah.
I was done. That's as far as I got into that movie for, I don't know, probably a couple of years. That was one that my dad picked up from the VHS store, brought it home, sat down, started watching it. And he's like, "You're really going to like this. I've seen it before." And that scene come, and that was it. I was gone. I was crying. I was shaking. I'd never seen anything like that, so scary. And it comes out of nowhere. It's like she's floating quite nicely, and then she turns, and then she just erupts. And yeah, it broke me. And honestly, I think I must have been, I don't know, 5 or 6. I was really young. This was a family movie we watched on a Sunday afternoon, and I didn't go back to this till I was probably 9 or 10.
That's good. I have Ghostbusters. As soon as you say Ghostbusters, I knew you were going to say the librarian scene, because that's really the only really scary scene, and it's good that it was at the beginning, so it kind of let you know that this is kind of going to be scary. It is a PG, but today it would probably be a 12A, I would guess.
Yeah.
Ghostbusters didn't scare me though. It was just the beginning of it, so I'm guessing maybe that's the same for you when you eventually watched it.
Yeah, when I went back to it, it was kind of like, once I was past that point, it's like, this is great. And Ghostbusters is one of my all-time favorite childhood movies now, and every Halloween that will go on at some point. I watch it every single year.
Yeah, it's a good one. I think it's not on my list, and neither is Ghostbusters 2, but I remember being scared of Ghostbusters 2 more than Ghostbusters because of is it Vigo, the painting?
Yeah, the painting.
Yeah, he scared me, and so did the little guy who was obsessed by it. I think
Yeah.
the two of them scared me when I was growing up. I was like, oh, they're really scary, they two. But yeah, Ghostbusters, the first one, didn't scare me, but the first scene though, the librarian, I remember that scaring me, but I didn't really watch it when I first saw that scene. I think it was just on in passing, and I was like, oh no, I'm not watching that. So maybe I was like you though, watched the first part and thought, nope, and then a couple of years later, I knew it was kind of a fun family horror, so I went back to it maybe.
Yeah, it was one I honestly, I avoided it for such a long time, and it was one that, because it had scared me, and dads were in the 80s and 90s, like, do you want to watch Ghostbusters today?
Yeah.
No. And it'd be like, oh, it's time for bed. Oh, I don't want to go to bed yet. Okay, well, I'm going to put Ghostbusters on. All right, I'm going now.
Scaring you with Ghostbusters. That's a shame. So my next one is not a horror. This is the only non-horror on my list. Not sure if you've seen this one, but it is a film called Mask from 1985, starring Cher and Eric
No.
Stoltz. Not heard of it?
No.
Scarred me. So it's a true story about a boy called Rocky Dennis. He had a face disfigurement, so his face was all disfigured, and Eric Stoltz plays him, so he's got this prosthetic head, and the way it looks, it's a shame because it's a true story, but the way his face looked traumatized me as I was watching it. Similar to American Werewolf in London, after seeing the movie, I would have nightmares about him. So I would have nightmares that I would be in my bed or I would be actually awake at this time. And I would think that he's in the corner in the dark, and I would have visions of him coming out fast right up to my face and me seeing him, or it'd be under my bed and I'd see his head poking out from under the bed. You could probably see, if you Google it, Rocky Dennis Mask, and you see his face, you'll understand. But that traumatized me. But the sad thing is, it's a true story. It's a romantic drama with Cher. And people, even when I was younger, my mum would say, "You want to watch Mask?" I'm like, "No, it's actually scary," and I have nightmares for years. If anybody's listening to this, guys, and if you're in the chat, let me know if you've seen Mask and if you've had the same feelings as me, because it completely broke me, traumatized me. I do remember after I got over my fear of Rocky Dennis, I would watch the film and think, that's actually a really good film. And it's quite sad as well. But I felt bad because it is a true story. And I was scared of this supposedly real life figure. And it traumatized. He's kind of like the Elephant Man.
Okay, but yeah, the crazy thing is I'm assuming the movie is him overcoming his disfigurement and becoming sort of accepted by everybody, and your initial reaction was to go, "You terrify me. I'm not watching this."
That's again. So at the time, I was laughing about it, going, "Oh, I'm so scared, ha ha ha!" But then as you get older, you're like, "I feel so bad. Why would I even say that?" Because I know that if I saw him in real life walking past me, I would cry as a kid, and it would be sad because he was a real life person. There's actually someone from Glasgow in real life who's got the same disfigurement or a similar disfigurement, and he's in a film called Under the Skin with Scarlett Johansson.
Okay, I think
she's an alien prostitute. I don't know if you've seen that one.
I think so. It's something's ringing a bell.
So he's in that. There's a guy in that with a similar disfigurement. He's just got his face is disfigured. But yeah, so there's people like that in the world. And thinking about it now, I'm like, God, I shouldn't have been scared of that. But I was. You're just a kid. You don't know what's real, what's not. But that just scared me to bits. But yeah, if you have time, watch it. It's actually a good movie as well. But yeah, check that one out. It's a good one.
Yeah, that's one I've not seen. I'll add it to my ever-growing watch list, which I'm sure you've got one of those as well.
I do have, yeah. I wouldn't put it to the top of your list. If you do have time one rainy afternoon, then maybe check it out. But yeah, don't bend over backwards to see it.
I'll put it on for my kids and see how they respond to it.
You could do it. I think that might be a PG. No, in fact, it might not be a PG. I can't remember. But yeah, it's a good film. But if you get young kids, they might get scared visually.
Okay.
Scared, like me.
Like you.
Yeah. So what's your fourth?
The Witches from 1990.
Ah, okay. Mm-hmm.
This movie terrified me. So we had, near where we lived, we had friends who run a B&B.
Oh, right, okay.
And they had, like, when you used to go in, it was like a big detached house. And when you walked in, there was the reception desk, then there was a staircase that went up and took you up to like 6 or 7 different bedrooms. And we used to go there on weekends, and we'd have use their restaurant and things like that. And it was like my dad knew their dad, and it was kind of like that was just a place we used to go and hang out at weekends.
Yeah.
And we watched The Witches in, I don't know, I think they'd have classed it as their conference room, but it was effectively a front room with a big long table. And we sat and watched Witches in there. And it just like everything, the surroundings and everything, it was almost like a virtual experience of it, because everything was white, and they had like these fake columns that had the fake gold painted around the top, and they had the red carpets, and then you see the big reveal of the Grand High Witch, and that was it. It was, I didn't want to go there because I was convinced they were going to come and stay as guests, and they were out to get me and my friend. I was convinced that was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, now my kids watch that movie and they're not bothered by it at all. And they watched the remake and they weren't bothered by that at all. But I think again, it was more caused by how I watched it and what was around me at the time that really hammered home. This is something, because in my child brain, Witches 100% existed in that way. And now I'm in a place where they could come and stay. All of that just rung true in my head. I was like, I got invited to a sleepover. I was like, no, I don't want to go. I don't fancy that at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Witches, it didn't scar me, but I was scared of the Witches as well. Do you remember the beginning where the little girl in the painting?
Yeah.
And then the dad is looking at the painting, but the way he's looking at the camera, us. I'm like, is he looking at me? And then
he stares straight through you.
Yeah. And you just see the little girl stuck in the painting because she was his daughter. And then
Yeah.
over the years, she moved around the painting and then disappeared. And I was so scared. And like you said, the scenery in The Witches is scary. It reminds me of World War II, doing the
Yeah.
Victorian houses and stuff like that. Very scary. And obviously that scene with the conference, the Grand High Witch, when they take all the wigs off and their shoes and stuff,
Yeah.
and the reveal of the Grand High Witch as well. And you're like,
Yeah.
whoa, this is not a PG. Surely this isn't a PG.
No,
But
and that's the crazy thing. Is like lots of these movies were not ones that I avoided the ones that I sought out and found. Or pretty much all of the movies on this list are ones that my parents and adults willingly gave to me as a child to sit and watch on my own or sit and watch with friends.
mhm,
And again, I think that's something else that adds to the fear, because when your parent gives you something to watch, you instantly go, this is fine. And
yeah,
then when it's not fine, that impact is so much greater than when you've gone and sought out a really scary movie. You're prepared to be scared. You're
yeah,
ready for something to
that's true.
horrify you. But yeah, when I sit down and go, oh, mum says this is okay. And then you get 3 minutes in, like, this is not okay.
Well, that's it. It's your comfort blanket. When your parents say, let's watch this, you automatically think, oh, it's going to be fine then. It's going to be
Yeah.
good. It's not going to be scary at all, but it turns out it will be. And I think that's where maybe my list is a little more traumatizing, because my parents let me watch anything when I come to think of it. You know, like, when I watched film, apart from The Exorcist, every other movie was fine to watch apart from that. My mum was quite religious when we were growing up as well, and maybe that was why, because of The Exorcist. But yeah, The Witches was that was a good one, and we watched it in school. Our school
Oh,
made us
really?
watch. Yeah, we
Uh,
were doing like a roll down. We were doing like a book fair, a book day thing. So we would always watch a movie based on a book. And I think it was when I was in primary 6 or something. We watched The Witches, which was a fun time, but it traumatized some of the kids.
Yeah, and
Strange.
this is back in the days when they used to wheel in the big TV on the stand, and I
Yeah.
miss that.
Yeah.
They don't do that with kids anymore.
Nah, it's a shame. So going from The Witches, my next one is A Nightmare on Elm Street.
That's quite a leap.
Slightly different, yeah. But again, it's one of those films where my mum and dad just like, yeah, on you go, watch it if you want. And I think maybe they wanted me to say no halfway through it and go to my bed, but I would always stay to the end, whether I wanted to or not. I just wanted maybe to annoy them and just stay to the very end. But A Nightmare on Elm Street is one of those ones where, because of the story, not only can you be killed in the real world, you can go to sleep and that's where you die. So after seeing the film, I would go to my bed thinking, I can't go to sleep now because Freddy Krueger's coming for me. But you know, I think maybe the scene with Tina on the ceiling when she's getting like dragged around the ceiling and stuff, that traumatized me. But I think what traumatized me most about A Nightmare on Elm Street was the music, the the little lullaby,
Yeah,
1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. I think it's because we would go to school and our friends in school would like sing to each other, like, 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you.
yeah,
And we'd be like, oh my God, have you seen that? And they're like, yeah, I've seen it. Oh, it's brilliant. It's amazing. Not scary at all. And because obviously there's been sequel after sequel when you were growing up, sometimes you didn't know what one you were watching. You just wanted to watch it because you wanted to listen to that song. You wanted to watch Freddy Krueger and you just wanted to see a horror film. So
yeah.
I think A Nightmare on Elm Street was the staple and a lot of people our age growing up.
Yeah, A Nightmare on Elm Street was the one for my sister. That
Yeah.
was the one that traumatized my sister to the point that she wouldn't want to go to sleep. She'd come and knock on my door. Okay, I can't sleep. I can't
Yeah.
sleep. Freddy's coming, and I was older than my sister at this point, and I'm like, "You'll be fine. You'll be fine." I watched it when I was younger. He didn't get me. But even now, like my sister on the back of A Nightmare on Elm Street and a couple of others does not watch horror at all.
Right.
Completely. Freddie scared her to the point where she will not watch a horror movie unless she's kind of forced upon her.
Uh-huh. Well, that's a shame. Well, us growing up, we had, I've got a big sister who's 2 years older than me, and we had to share a room for years because we had 3 bedrooms and there was 4 kids. So we had an older brother who had his own room. Me and my sister had to share a room, and my little brother, who was 7 years younger than me, was in with my mum and dad in his cot. So me and my sister shared the room. So when we watched a horror film, we kind of thought it was okay because after it was over, we would both know each other or with each other
Yeah.
at the end, and we would go to bed, and I would see my sister across the room, and she would see me. So I think that was kind of a comfort blanket as well, knowing that somebody else was there and had already experienced the same thing as me. And I felt like I could handle horrors more than my sister, but she was a little bit older than me, so we kind of bounced off each other and helped each other. So I think that's why we could watch these films and be scared, but know that we're going to be okay. If you
Yeah.
know?
Was there any particular scene in A Nightmare on Elm Street, or was it more conceptually scary to you as a kid?
Just conceptually scary. I think it's because that you're going to bed and you have to go to sleep, and that's what the film's about. You know,
Yeah.
Freddy getting you in your sleep. So you wanted to go to sleep because you were tired, but you also didn't want to go to sleep because that was what was going to kill you ultimately. But yeah, A Nightmare on Elm Street, that was some experience. And then obviously seeing all the sequels after that, I had a similar experience with them until eventually I got old enough to know that nothing's going to happen.
Yeah. The thing is that series is one of my favorite series, and I got A Nightmare on Elm Street very young, and it did scare me, but I don't know why it didn't make my list, because I had the same experience as you. It's like, I don't want to go to bed, I don't want to go to sleep. This monster's going to come and get me. But I think because I swayed away from the 18 rated, that's the only reason it's not on my list, because I think it would have been quite easily.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you swayed away from it because that means we've both got something different. Apart from RoboCop so far,
Yeah.
hopefully they're all different from each other. So what's the fifth one on your list?
Fifth one on my list is conceptually scary and arguably the scariest movie ever made, ever, still to this day, and that's Jaws.
Ah, okay.
Jaws scared me as a kid to the point that if I had a bath that had too many bubbles in it, I would be nervous. And I know I'm not alone on this. It scared an entire generation out of the sea. There was coastal towns that reported a dip in tourism after Jaws, but it really got to me. And there's one scene in particular that even now I know it's coming, and it still makes me jump every single time. And it's the head that pops out of the boat.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still, even now, I know it's coming, and every single time I still go, fuck.
Is it the bit where he's putting the stuff in the water?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's horrific.
Yeah. Yeah. It's strange because it scared me when I was younger, but it didn't have a lasting impact on me, Jaws. I'm not a strong swimmer, and I never was, but I'm not scared of films like Jaws because I know that it's like a puppet or a big mechanical machine. But yeah, I think similar to movies like A Nightmare on Elm Street, what scared me more about Jaws was maybe the music, the score.
Yeah.
But the movie itself had a few jump scenes, but to me, I never grew up being scared of Jaws. And I think it's maybe because at that point I saw it as an older movie when I first got into films. So I was like 10, 15 years old by the time I started really wanting to watch a lot of good horror films. And I would just point my nose up at films that were PGs. So if I'd see a Jaws, I'm like, no way, I'm watching A Nightmare on Elm Street or An American Werewolf in London. So I think I got to a point where I wasn't scared of Jaws anymore. I don't even think it's a PG anymore. I think they've re-rated it to 12 now.
Yeah,
I'm sure
they have re-rated it. I know when it came out, it was definitely a PG. This was one we got from the video store and took home and watched. Yeah. And I got the opportunity. So when I was about 26, 27, we went to Mexico, and they were doing cage diving with sharks. And I was in my mid-20s, and I was very full of bravado and, yeah, I'll do it. I'll go down and do that. And there was a guy called John. I'll never forget him. He was a really big guy, no neck, covered in tattoos. And he's like, I'm going to go down, lads, first. I'll show you how it's done. I was like, yeah, okay, I'm up after you. I'm not worried. It's only a fish. was what I said. He come up and he was white as a sheet. He went and threw up afterwards. And then by this time, the sharks had come in, and I went and looked over the back of the boat, and all of those memories of watching Jaws just come flooding back. Not specific scenes, but it was they can eat me.
Yeah.
And I've seen them eat people on film. I'm not going to do it. And I didn't do it. I bottled it. I lost my deposit and didn't go down in the cage.
That's worth it though. You saved yourself. Yeah. No, I wouldn't even dream of doing anything like that. Like, although Jaws doesn't scare me, just the thought of going under the water in that cage, and anything can happen. Do you imagine the rope snapped, or they got in through the bars? Obviously, you always think of the worst.
Yeah.
And if a big guy like him with no neck would come back up and go, oh my God.
He was white, and he was sat, and he sort of had his wife patting his shoulder going, "Are you okay?" And he said, I've never been so scared. I've never seen anything so big in my entire life. And I was like, do you know what? I'm not feeling it anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not as confident as I was 10 minutes ago.
Nah, keep your money.
Yeah.
Nah, not for me. That probably scares me way more than watching Jaws as a kid, to be honest. Yeah. Jaws. Right, so my next one, it's a kind of a cheat because it's a TV series, but
I think I know what you're going to say before you even say it, but go on, carry on.
no, I don't know. It's supposed to be a TV series, but it's been re-released multiple times as a movie, and it is 1990s It. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is classed as a movie these days, so we'll call it a movie. But everyone younger was probably scared of clowns at some point. And Pennywise, the dancing clown from 1990, that was just petrifying. And it was one of the ones where my parents would be like, oh, it's a TV show, let's watch it as a family.
Yeah.
So we watched part 1 on the Friday night or whatever it was, and part 2 the week after. And I was traumatized, but I still loved it. I was like, wow, I want to get my friends together and I want to go out and look for a clown. So we would go down to like the barracks and stuff, similar to what it's like in the TV movie, and we would find little areas where we've got a little stream and old abandoned warehouses and stuff, and we'd be like, right, let's go in there, let's go and look for Pennywise. I don't know if in Scotland, I don't know if you had it in England, but we had the killer clowns in transit vans. It was like I don't know if it was an urban legend or something that was actually true, but apparently there was people dressed as clowns going about in vans and taking people or attacking people back in the early 90s. Did you remember that?
No, we didn't get that. That was exclusive to the north of the United Kingdom.
It sounds like it, yeah. So we called them killer clowns in transit vans, but it became so widespread that we actually went to school one day and we had an assembly. The head teacher rounded everyone up and said, right, just watch where you're going and watch out for vans and stuff. And we're like, you just made it even scarier, because we thought it was a bit of a joke to begin with, but it actually got really serious to the point where our parents were having to bring us home, not letting us out in the streets and stuff at night. And I think it was all down to it when it came out in 1990. There was that total influx of clown sightseeing throughout the UK or throughout Scotland. The same thing happened when the new movie came out in 2017. Did you see these things online where people were seeing clowns?
Yeah, I drove past one. I live right in the south of the UK. I'm just near the New Forest.
Right.
And for my job, I drive through the New Forest every day. And I drove through I had to be on site really early. And I drove through about 4:30 in the morning. And there was a clown on the side of the road holding a balloon, waving at all the cars.
Yikes.
Yeah,
it freaked me out.
It freaked me out. When you do a double take and then it takes your breath away.
Uh-huh.
It was that. And then when I got to site and I was telling everyone at site that, oh yeah, we see him every single morning when we drive in. It's like, and you're okay with that? It's like, no, we've reported him. So like loads of people have reported this guy and the police never come and got him. And I think probably because he wasn't doing anything malicious. He was scary, but he was just waving at cars holding a balloon.
Yeah, so nothing you can really do. It's just he could always just say he was just being happy. But yeah, the clowns, though. Clowns just freaked me out. But obviously, Pennywise back in the early 90s for us. Oh, that was a scary time.
And Tim Curry
Yeah.
kills that role.
Oh, it's
He is
unbelievable.
terrifying as that character.
Yeah. We've got the Dream Villain says Pennywise was more terrifying in the original than in the remake. I mean, I agree and disagree. I think the Bill Skarsgård's got really unique features for
Yeah.
Pennywise, and so does Tim Curry. I think they're both equally as scary as each other. Obviously, for me, it's Tim Curry because I was genuinely scared growing up.
Yeah.
Whereas when I watched the remake, I was 33 years old at the time, so the fear went out the window. I wasn't scared anymore. Were you scared of Pennywise when you were a kid?
Yeah, I was scared of Pennywise. The bit that scared me in Pennywise the most was when he comes up through the hole. He makes the hole in the showers.
Yeah.
Because after when we done pee and stuff, you go and have a shower afterwards, and there's always that big drain. And I remember being a kid looking, going, that's worrying. And yeah, Pennywise freaked me out as a kid, a lot. And again, it's the scenes that he's not actually doing anything particularly menacing. It's just more him being there, like the scene where he dances up to the page of the book, and then that is just a wow. I remember that being a massive talking point at school when that come out. That the bit where it's like, did you see the bit where he come out of the book and like, yeah, I did.
Yeah.
That was a huge thing because early 90s we would have been just starting secondary school.
You maybe.
But yeah, that was one that everyone watched. Everyone saw that, and as you say, everyone sat down as families because it was really pushed and really advertised as this is the thing you must watch, and everyone did.
Yeah, and there was a scene in it, but didn't even involve Pennywise. Well, it was Pennywise, but he obviously is a shapeshifter, and it was when Beverly Marsh went to her old house, and it was her dad, well, it was old lady, Mrs. Kirsch.
Yeah.
And she was morphing into her dad, and he was this old haggard man. He's like, I'll worry about you, Bevy. Sometimes I'll worry a lot. And the way he said it, I was like, oh my God. And then she runs away, turns around, and then it's Pennywise laughing and smiling. I'm just like, this is unbelievable. This is so scary. So yeah, that's that one of the films that just totally scarred me. And even today, I just remember how scarred I was. I was just like, wow. But I loved it for that because I wanted a film to scar me as a kid.
Yeah, and the thing is with Pennywise, I've said this whenever I talk to him, Pennywise is scarier when he's not actually attacking. He's scarier when it's almost like he likes to play with his food, and that's where he's the most terrifying. He's tormenting them and making them more scared so they taste better. And that's the bit that makes him horrible more so than a Freddy Krueger, because a Freddy Krueger will torment you, but not to the extent that Pennywise will. I mean, in that series, he done it for weeks. The amount of time those kids go through continual trauma from Pennywise, he kind of lets them recover and then comes back and hits them with something a little bit scarier than the last time. He's genuinely a terrifying villain.
Yeah. Then Mark's in the chat. He says, the X-Files episode Chinga was the most traumatizing thing when I was growing up. It was the episode with the porcelain dolls that came to life. We had those in our house and I didn't sleep for a year. I don't remember that episode. I've watched a few of the X-Files episodes when I was younger. Do you remember that one?
I remember the porcelain doll one, and that didn't scare me that much. The one that always sticks in my head is Squeeze. Do you remember Squeeze?
I was going to say Eugene Victor Toombs.
Yeah, he was terrifying. And that was one that I had nightmares after watching that, and like you're putting towels down on the floor to stop him coming. That was horrific, that one. But the X-Files was something that literally brought you a different trauma every single week.
I don't remember much about the X-Files when I was growing up because I didn't watch it that often, but I just remember Eugene Victor Toombs when he was stretching I was like, oh my God, this guy's scary. And then he was in The Green Mile as well.
Yes.
And I was just like, there's Eugene Victor Toombs, and he's scary in that as well. Just that face, and it just reminds me of him. There's not a lot of TV shows that scared me when I was younger, but the X-Files had a few creepy ones in it, I would say.
Yeah.
I've just done my sixth one there. So we're on to your sixth one now, Scott.
We're going to stick with Tim Curry, but we're going to go for another PG movie from the 80s, Legend.
That's a good one.
The Devil terrified me to a point that I was brought up in. We were brought up in a Catholic family. I went to a Catholic school, and that was kind of drummed into us that the devil is real, the devil is scary, the devil will come and get you.
Yeah.
I didn't really believe any of that, and I'm not a practicing Catholic now. But when I watched Legend, everything I was told at school and in church all of a sudden become very, very real. That character brought to life fears that I didn't even know existed in me.
Yeah, I don't remember too much about it, but I do remember him being scary, and the horns as well were huge, weren't they? Like big, huge horns. Obviously, it's the look of him that is petrifying.
Yeah.
I don't know how they get away with a PG with that one.
No, it was. I think it was even a Disney production from memory.
Right.
I believe it was a Disney movie, and it was horrifically traumatizing. Not for any other reason, but again, I was at an age where I was very much like, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in the devil. It's all a big story that you're telling me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I watched that movie, and I started doubting what the self-belief I had that I was right. I doubted, because that portrayal was so like, if there is a hell and there is a devil, I do not want it to be that guy.
Yeah.
And again, Tim Curry.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, he totally gives 110% with all his roles.
Yeah.
I think the issue I had with Legend was, because I've not seen it in years, I would always get that mixed up with movies like Lady Hawk, The Neverending Story, The Labyrinth, Dark Crystal, all those kind of movies. Cruel with a K. All those movies kind of merged into one for me, and I don't remember too much about some of them, but I do remember, and it was Legend and Cruel that scared me a little bit for certain scenes, and obviously because of Tim Curry's performance as was he actually called the devil in it?
I can't remember if he's called the devil or the demon, but he is meant to be the actual devil.
Yeah. So because of him, that was what scared me about Legend. But even if I think about it today, I think it is still a PG. I don't think it's been re-rated or anything.
No.
So yeah, I think maybe they need to look at that.
When you said about Cruel, is that the one with the glaive, the spinning blade that the guy used to? That movie. Yeah, that movie, I absolutely loved that as a kid. I wanted to be part of their little band of adventurers going off to the mountain that takes off into space. I loved that movie growing up.
Yeah. So I've not seen that in years either, but I think maybe it's the same production company or something. But yeah, those films were great. Adventure, like fantasy adventures. That's what we got back then.
They were Lord of the Rings before we got Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, that was the 80s versions of the Lord of the Rings movies. Really bad CGI, because most things were supposed to be practical, but they were toying with CGI at the time. But again, Tim Curry was all practical with his look for Legend. That's maybe why it was even scarier, because it just looks so real.
It really does. And even if you look at images now, or any of the scenes that he's in where he's giving his big booming scary voice, it still now looks great and still has that fear-inducing impact where you go, yeah, I don't like this. I still now, I like the film, but still now that performance is still very intimidating. I wouldn't dream of showing that to my kids.
No.
Well,
I don't know if it's just been released or getting a release, but I think it's coming out in 4K.
Oh, wow.
So I may actually get it, because I've not seen it in years, and I think it'd be good to watch it on 4K possibly. and seeing what all the fuss is about. Because again, it's been about 30 years, maybe 25 years or so since I last watched it. So I think it's due a rewatch, and I think you've kind of gave me an idea. You put me in the mood for it to get scared.
Okay. Yeah.
Scared of a PG. So my next one, my seventh one, don't know if you've seen this one. It's Jekyll and Hyde from 1990, starring Michael Caine. Did you know that one existed?
No, I didn't know that existed, but I'm instantly interested because I love Jekyll and Hyde, and Michael Caine's amazing in everything he does.
Yeah, Michael Caine is incredible in this one. So much so that he frightened the life out of me as a kid because of this movie. It was probably made for TV. It's a British film. It's got. Have you seen Cabin Fever?
Yes.
Do you know one of the main girls, Jordan Ladd?
Mm-hmm.
Blonde hair. Her
Yeah.
mum is in this film. I can't
Okay.
remember. So her mum plays the main woman that's with Michael Caine in it. Anyway, it's your typical Jekyll and Hyde story, but there was this one scene, and it's on YouTube available, this scene where Michael Caine is turning into the monster. Is it Hyde or Jekyll?
Yeah.
He's turning into the monster, and it's all practical, but the way he's doing it is similar to An American Werewolf in London, only it's going from Jekyll to Hyde. And honestly, the finished product scared me so much. It was almost like Rocky Dennis from Mask,
Yeah.
or the Elephant Man, the way he looked at the end of it. I'm just like, oh my God, this is so scary. I don't remember too much more about it other than that one specific scene. But I used to talk to my mum about it all the time and say, oh, do you remember that film with Michael Caine? He turns into this monster. And she couldn't really remember what it was I was talking about, but it scarred me anyway. So I would always look for it online. But I didn't even know it was a Jekyll and Hyde movie until I found it. Excuse me. I found it on IMDb. I was just like, what's the movie Michael Caine turns into a monster? And people are like, well, that's Jekyll and Hyde. I'm like, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I searched for it on YouTube, and lo and behold, that transformation scene is available on YouTube, and I've not watched it. I can't do it, but it frightened me as a kid because I was like, whoa, this guy is menacing.
I'm
Scary.
gonna stick that on my Instagram story tomorrow. I'm gonna download that and play with it and stick it
Yeah.
out so it'll pop up on your news feed so you can't avoid it.
I'll have my earphones out. I'll have the volume down low.
The thing is, Jekyll and Hyde, the story is amazing. I'm amazed we've not got a modern horror based on Jekyll and Hyde.
They tried. I've not seen it, but they tried it in The Mummy. I'm sure with Russell Crowe.
Oh,
Did they not? Have you seen The Mummy, the Tom Cruise one?
Oh, that's the Tom Cruise one? Yeah, I switched it off about 3/4 of the way through.
Well, you'd watched more than me. I've never seen it before, but I heard that Russell Crowe was in it, and he played a kind of cameo role as Dr. Hyde.
Oh, okay.
Whatever, Dr. Jekyll, whatever it was.
Yeah.
So he was supposed to be the Jekyll and Hyde of this new universe, this multiverse or universe of monsters. But obviously the Mummy bombed, so it just never went ahead for some reason, or for that reason.
Because they've binned that off now, and they've started again now with Renfield, and there's another one coming next year as well.
Ryan Gosling's playing the Wolfman next year.
Yeah, there's is it Melissa Barrera? Bride of Dracula, I think, is one that Radio Silence have dropped Scream 6 to go and do.
That's right, yeah. So that's going to be part of a hopeful universe for them. I hope they don't ride too much on that, because they try and make a story, it doesn't work, and then they scrap the future films. They should just do the one-off films and hope that they're good, and then maybe find a way to tie them in together. Yeah. But don't rely on this multiverse or universe, because it will get old.
I've always had an issue with when they make a movie, and they make a movie specifically to make more. So when they announce a movie and they go, this is going to be part of a trilogy, it's like, well, what if your first movie's rubbish? Why are you telling us you're making 3 now?
Like The Exorcist?
Make one, and then let us decide as an audience if you make another one.
Yeah. Well, we've been to see a few films this year. We went to see Fast and Furious 10, and at the end of it, it says, look out for the next movie.
Yeah.
And that movie didn't do too well at the box office. And then a couple of weeks later, we saw Across the Spider-Verse, which was good. and then it says, "Oh, part two's coming," and we're like, "Oh, okay." So we're getting half a story in these films, and we're like, "Right, okay, we need to wait for the next one." But if this one bombs or nobody likes it, are they still going to go ahead and make the next film? You know?
Yeah, and that's so Mark, you'd be my co-host on horror movie review. His biggest issue is not having to watch another movie to understand the movie he's watching. He's
Yeah,
got a real issue. Like we reviewed X, and he hated X because he didn't have enough exposition as to why the old lady was doing what she was doing. I was like, well, there's Pearl. He's like, but I shouldn't have to watch another movie to understand fully what's going on in the movie I'm watching now. And he's got a
yeah,
real problem with it.
yeah. I think it can work. Like, see, if we use X as an example, if they weren't planning on making Pearl and they gave us a bit of a backstory with Pearl in X,
Yeah,
then maybe it would have been better. But it's almost like they did film it with the notion that there's going to be an explanation in a different movie. But if you weren't to know that Pearl was coming out, or you didn't bother seeing it, then you would still have kind of half a story with her
yeah,
when it should be a full story. So I get what he means. Um, but yeah, sometimes it works, but sometimes it doesn't,
yeah.
sadly.
I quite I like things that are left quite ambiguous. I like it when if they end something, they don't outright say there's going to be a sequel, but they leave just enough that you go, there could be.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
way they should do it.
Exactly. Yeah. Give us a story, a complete story, and then see what the audience thinks, and then you can decide what to do after that.
Yeah.
So we're on to your seventh now, Scott.
My seventh is the only other R-rated movie on here, and this is Child's Play,
Oh, okay.
1988. This was the first real horror movie that my parents endorsed, and it was actually my dad went, "There's a movie. Do you want to watch it with me? It is scary." And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. He's like, it's about a doll. I was like, okay, that doesn't bother me. My sister's got dolls. My sister collected dolls. And I was like, well, my sister's got dolls. I see dolls all the time. This will be fine. And I was okay pretty much all the way through until Chucky has his meltdown when the mum threatens to throw him in the fire.
Yeah.
He went from being a creepy little doll to something I was genuinely terrified of. And my sister had a huge collection of dolls, and I believed these dolls were possessed. They were going to come get me. And my sister knew, and she played on this. She would move her dolls about the house. We had an ongoing game where she would move 3 or 4 of her, like they were big, like cuddly dolls with porcelain faces and porcelain hands, and she'd move them around the house and put them somewhere, and then I'd go to the toilet and come back and they will have moved. And this went on for I don't know, it felt like months. It was probably a week, but in my child mind, this was like torment for a very long time.
God. Yeah. I mean, Child's Play, similar to some of the ones on your list, it wasn't the original that scared me. It was like their sequel, like Child's Play 2. I think was one of the ones that scared me the most because of the big house that they were in. It was very colourful, pastel colours, and then they went to the warehouse at the end, and then Chucky was just non-stop. But in the first one, I get what you mean. I can't remember what he says, but when she's trying to throw him in the fire, he turns around or something and says something to her.
Yeah,
And then,
he's calls it. It's something like you effing bitch. I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna gut you. And he's flailing his arms and kicking his legs, and
yeah,
I was like, oh my god, I'd have thrown him in the fire
yeah.
straight away without hesitation.
Yeah, it totally throws you off that bit because, like you said, it's scary, and then when it gets to that point, you're like, "Holy shit, what's happening?" And he just goes completely nuts.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is a traumatizing film for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. But yeah, Child's Play is sadly not on my list. It nearly made my list, but it just didn't quite do it. So I'm glad you've mentioned it because I think it deserves to be on a list of scary movies growing up for sure. Obviously, today, if a kid watches this film, they'll be like, nah, that's not scary. But
and the thing is, though, Child's Play was one that parents would pick up from the video store as well. Like even Child's Play was the one that if you wanted to convince your parents to buy you or rent you a horror movie, it was the one you could pick up and take to them, because they'd look at the front and go, it's a doll. They'd look at the back and go, it's about a doll. And
Yeah.
they would rent it out. I had so many friends who got this movie just through, oh, can I get this movie about a doll? And the parents would be like, yeah, whatever, sling it on the side. And they'd get it and they'd watch it. And it was, I don't know, I think there was a period in the 80s and 90s, and I know every movie company will deny this, they made their covers so children could rent them in video stores to get around it. That they made covers that appealed to younger audiences, a little bit like they do with sweet wrappers and vape pens, to convince the kids that they need them, and then basically bully the parents into getting them for them.
Yeah, I agree with that, because back then we didn't have access to trailers. If Jack said to me, my boy, "Oh, can I see this film?" The first thing I would do is watch the trailer just to see what it's about, or go online to see what it's about. But when you're an adult in the 80s and 90s, if your kid says, "Can I have Child's Play?" they just, all they can rely on is the cover art, and if it looked colourful and fluffy, you would be like, "Aye, okay then, fair enough." Because back in the late 80s, the ratings weren't advertised as much. Obviously, they got more strict in the 90s, but back in the olden days, it was just a case of, it looks like a colourful movie, it probably is, and that was it. So good for kids if you wanted to watch it, but bad for parents, because you don't know what your kid's going to watch until it's too late.
Until they're downstairs crying that they've seen a scary doll.
Yeah, or they can't get to sleep at night and you're suffering because your kid can't sleep. We've got David Diggs said, Barry and Scott, are you gentlemen in your 30s or 40s? Well, luckily I'm in my 30s. I'm 39.
I am not. I am in my 40s.
Yeah, I'll be 40 in December, so I'll be joining the club soon.
Yeah, I'm on the slow ski down to 50 now. I'm quite happy with that.
That's all right. My wife's born in 82, so she's older than me. I always hold that over her.
Yeah, my missus is 81, and I always say that the only reason you're with me is because I'm your toy boy.
She's 81.
No, she's not 80. She's born in 81.
Well, you go for the older ladies. So who was that? You there? Yeah, you done Child's Play.
Yeah.
So I'm going on to my 8th one, and let me just want to make sure I'm getting them in order. So my 8th one is Pet Sematary, the original Pet Sematary from 1989. It's a scary movie, but like a lot of scary movies, there's a subplot that seems to be scarier than the actual main story. And although there's scary scenes in it, like Gage jumping out in front of going out in front of the truck, which traumatized me as a kid, the sister Zelda, the one with the bone deficiency.
Spine. I can't remember what it was. I
spina bifida or something.
Yeah.
So she was frightening, played by a man, but she was absolutely scary. And I always had a dream that, similar to the film, she was going to come down and get me, and you'd be able to hear her first. And it's just I don't know if you remember the scene where she's in her bedroom saying "Never sleep again," I think it is.
Yeah.
And she goes right up to the camera, and she's like shouting at the camera. I'm like, oh my God, that was traumatizing as a kid, because again, you're scared of the features of this character, even though the features of this character is real life. Like, there's people with that deformity in real life, but they're making it for you to be scared of it, which is quite sad and sick, to be honest.
It is, but Zelda was scary, and I'll go as far as Judd scared me as well.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he was a big, deep voice kind of guy that sometimes dead is better.
Yeah.
He was a scary character. It's funny because Zelda scared me as a kid, but watching it as an adult, as a parent, seeing Gage walking out in front of that truck, it actually broke me as an adult, because I was like, oh, so you think of your kids, and see when the dad sees it happen, and then his whole life flashed before his eyes, and you see like all the times he had
Yeah.
with his kid, just like it really got me in the heart. And seeing what he does after that to bring Gage back, you feel like, do you know what? I understand now why you done that, because
Yeah.
I'm a parent and I would probably do the same if I had the option to do that. So it's a funny film that you can watch it as a kid and be scared for one reason, watch it as an adult and be scared for a completely different reason. I think that's great about this film because it adds the layer to the movie. You, you're scared of certain aspects, probably depending on what age you are and what your family life is like, you know?
Yeah, I Pet Cemetery on a rewatch as an adult is a completely different movie, as you say, especially when you've got kids.
Mhm.
That moment where Gage is about to step into the road, you're almost screaming at the screen for him to move quicker. And
Yeah.
when I watched it the most recent time, I would like to think I would have moved faster than he did.
Yeah.
But yeah, I completely get why it scared you as a kid, and I get why it scares you as an adult. And without a shadow of a doubt, if that was an option, regardless of what the risks may be, I think every parent would take that option and go, we'll work around the fact that you're a little bit homicidal when you come back, and we'll
Yeah.
deal with it. But yeah,
Yeah.
Pet Cemetery is genuinely a scary film, and Church the Cat is scary as well.
Yeah. Church is scary. Somebody else said, who was it? David Diggs says Pet Sematary is on my list. Pascal and Zelda sent
Uh,
shivers down my spine. So Pascal as well
is
was
the
another scary
ghost?
one.
He's the spirit guide ghost
Yeah.
guy. Yeah, he dies at the beginnings, brought in where he was hit by one of the trucks.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know if that was a ironic comment you said, David, where you said sent shivers down my spine when Zelda doesn't have a spine, a proper spine. That's a shame. Don't know why I said that. Yeah, Scoutman said Zelda freaked me out. The little boy getting hit by the truck definitely affects you differently as a parent. So yeah, I think whether you're a parent or not, you get something out of Pet Cemetery. And
yeah.
it doesn't matter when you watch it. There's just something about it that freaks you out. Have you seen the trailer for the new one, the prequel?
The prequel, yeah, I've seen the trailer. I quite like the idea, but we kind of already know the story. It's the story that Judd tells
Hmm.
mid movie.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's the only issue that I have with it. Knowing what's going to happen, knowing
Yeah.
who's going to die, knowing who's going to live. But hopefully they do something well with it. I thought it was going to look cheap and nasty, but it actually looks decent. So I'm looking forward to it because I do like the history and the story that he tells. So why not visually have a look at it and see how they get on?
What were
Oh,
your
sorry.
thoughts on the remake?
I like it. Um, and I think, again, because I watched it for the first time as a parent, then it kind of hit me hard
Yeah.
when the well, I might as well spoil it because I'm guessing people have seen it. But when they changed it up and it was a wee girl this time, and then just watching the girl, and it was quite uh, visual when they were showing it. Yeah, I think it had a similar impact because I'm a parent. Maybe if I wasn't, if I watched it as a kid, I'd be like, "This is all right." But I actually liked it. Not as good as the original, but it still holds up. It's pretty good. Do you like it?
I, I wasn't a huge fan of it, and I think that's probably because I hold the original in such high esteem,
Yeah.
and I try not to, but I do occasionally do they done that better first time round. They done that better first time round, and I found myself 20 minutes in going, this is such a lower quality in everything but visuals
Hmm.
compared to the original. I don't know. I'm a big advocate for remakes. I think they've got a place. I think they're actually good for the horror genre and all genres.
Yeah.
But that one, it didn't do it for me. I
Yeah.
don't know why.
I actually liked the ending to the remake better than the original. When the little boy's in the car and the whole family, the daughter and the mum and dad, come out the house and they walk towards the little boy in the car. I thought that
Yeah,
was quite chilling. Um, so
yeah,
there's certain aspects of the remake that I like, but ultimately the original is the superior movie, and it's just got that aesthetic to it as well. You know, that late 80s aesthetic that, yes, nostalgia can play a part, but watching it, you just know that regardless of how much money or how much more money the remake cost, the original just got that better, richer quality to it. And Stephen
Yeah.
King was a part of that as well, you know. So yeah, I think the original is a lot better, but I still think the remake's okay. It's pretty good, to be honest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. It didn't sit right with me for some reason. Sometimes you get movies like that. That there's so
Yeah.
many movies that people have gone, "This is amazing. You have to watch it," and then I watch it and kind of go, well, "It's not that great. Why
Yeah.
is everyone jumping up and down about it?"
Yeah, I'm the same with one of the recent ones is Midsummer. I didn't like Midsummer at all,
Nor did
but
I.
did you not? No, you're the
It,
first person I spoke to that doesn't like it either. But it's held in high regard, and I'm just like, I don't like this at all. And I know the message they're trying to send. I know how artsy it is and stuff, but nah, it missed the mark
I
for me.
I referred to it as the slower, less fun version of The Wicker Man.
Right, there you go. So that's almost like a little remake then.
Yeah.
Uh, Scoutman said, where were we? Scoutman said, when does the prequel come out? This is the Pet Sematary prequel. I think it's the 6th of October, I
Yeah,
believe.
it's
Yep.
very, very soon.
On Paramount Plus.
Yeah.
So that was my 8th one. So we're on to your 8th one now.
This is one that I don't know if you will know.
Right? Okay.
This was a video we had at home, and I don't know where it come from. It was one that had always been there, and one day I decided to put it on, and it scared me. It was called Little Monsters from 1989.
Of course, I've got it on Blu-ray.
Really?
Yeah.
I love this movie now. My kids love this movie now. When I first watched this, the concept of having an entire monster world that lived under my bed and all of my friends' beds was awful, absolutely awful. And then it only got worse when you meet Snick, the bully, the bully you would never get in a movie today, in a kids' movie today, who's there chain smoking and it just that whole world. So when they go down into this monster world, like the lighting, the whole aesthetic of it, and even the monsters that are friendly, just that whole thing just really freaked me out. And I watched that really, really young.
Yeah.
And I had the thing where I would lean over the bed and check under the bed before I put my feet down. This movie had a massive impact on me as a kid.
Yeah.
And it affected like bedtime become difficult. You need to check my closet. You need to check under the bed. You need to leave the light. I need to have a night light now. I need to have the door open a little bit now.
Mhm.
This really changed everything for me. And now I watch it and it's great. I love it. And it's fun and it's cheesy. But as, I don't know, a 6-year-old boy, the idea of a world where monsters could come and kidnap me did not sit well with me at all.
Yeah. It's funny you should say it like that because I had the complete opposite feeling towards Little Monsters. And I think it's because I wanted to watch it initially for Fred Savage because I was a massive Fred Savage fan growing up. And it came out around about the same time as Wizard and vice versa.
Yeah.
So those two movies came out. I absolutely loved those two movies. I watched them all the time. And then Little Monsters came out and I thought, I need to see that. That's great. And I loved it, and I wasn't scared at all. And I remember not being scared. I don't know why, because yeah, some of the monsters do look quite scary. Like Howie Mandel, the main monster,
Yeah.
played by Howie Mandel. He's quite scary looking. Even on the front cover of the Blu-ray, he looks quite scary. To be honest, if you stuck that picture of him on a horror cover, you'd be like, okay,
Yeah.
looks quite scary. So yeah, it does look scary. I did watch it a few years ago with my kids. They didn't like it. They thought it was boring. And I was
Oh,
just like,
really?
yeah. And it's so soul destroying when they say stuff like that because I'm hyping myself up. I'm like, right, we've got a really good film to watch. I watched it every day as a kid. I absolutely loved it. Let's do it. And then 20 minutes in, they're like, this is rubbish.
Yeah.
I'm like, what did you say? And they're like, no, I want to go and watch Harry Potter or Transformers. I'm like, oh, why? So yeah, it's soul destroying, but Little Monsters is great, but for different reasons for me, because definitely one that I wasn't scared of. What? So is it just the thought of monsters being under your bed?
Yeah, it was the conceptual thing. It wasn't so much the monsters under the bed, it was the fact that there was a whole world under there. So
Yeah,
they wouldn't like grab me and scare me. They could actually drag me down and take me into this other world. And the parents couldn't get in there because you'd only get in there if you were a kid. And it was the idea that I could be taken somewhere where no one could get me terrified me.
yeah. It kind of reminded me of Labyrinth as well. Have you seen Labyrinth?
I have, yeah.
Yeah,
David
so
Bowie.
yeah, so they go into this labyrinth, of course, but the whole world that they're in is completely different to you. Only difference is the little monsters is just happening right underneath you,
Yeah.
and you don't know about it until you're there. So it's a scary concept, but nah, this didn't scare me at all. Sorry. Here's you watching Little Monsters, and I'm watching A Nightmare on Elm Street. Oh my days. Um, it's quite fitting for my ninth movie, because my ninth movie is almost like an adult version of Little Monsters. So it's quite fitting, and it is Nightbreed. Have you seen Nightbreed?
Yes, not for a very long time though.
Yeah,
Very
it's
long time.
Clive Barker, the 1990, I think it was, I believe, or 91. Um, I remember seeing this in the video store before I saw it, and the front cover scared me. It had the main bad guy. He looked kind of like the Predator,
Yeah.
um, really scary looking. And I remember watching it on TV one night. It was on Sky Movies or whatever it was called at the time, and I was scared, absolutely scared. And there's two versions of Nightbreed. There's the original version that I watched, which was these monsters were scary, but they've recently released it. The cable, a Cabal cut. It's like a 3 hour
Okay.
version, and the movie was intended to have the monsters as good guys.
Oh,
So
okay.
they were the good guys. So I watched it maybe 5 years ago or something, the Cabal cut, and it's almost double the length of the original movie. And it's strange watching them as good guys, because I watched it and I'm saying to myself, why was I so scared of these monsters when they were the good guys? So I've yet to rewatch Nightbreed as it was originally shown to me. So I'm going to do that again, because the monsters were scary and they had all different shapes and sizes. Again, it's one of those ones I probably shouldn't have watched, because I think there's some adult themes in the movies. I don't know if your parents were the same as mine, where they're okay with me watching someone getting their head chopped off.
Yeah.
Whenever you seen boobies, they were like, "Oh no, 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 don't look at that." Did you ever?
Yeah.
Were they like that with you?
Yeah, because you used to get it in a lot of PG movies. A lot of PG movies you could have like one boob flash.
Yeah,
And I remember, yeah, vividly, it'd be my mum would like hand would come over the face like you can't see that. You can't see boobs. But like the night before, I sat watching Child's Play, and that was fine. My dad was
yeah.
cool with that. But yeah, you can't look at boobs. That's not allowed.
I know it's strange, because it's the same with Nightbreed. I remember watching Nightbreed, and there was all these like people getting this, like this guy got his skin taken off his face. In fact, he'd done it himself, and he pulled his skin off his face. And then my mum and dad were looking at it going, "Oh yeah," and then and I would be sitting going, "Oh yeah," and then you would see this woman taking her top off, and I would be like, "Oh yeah," and my parents would be like, "Oh no," they would cover me. I'm like, "What? I can't see." So yeah, it's just strange how, and I do it to my kids as well. If we watch a film and like they know now, but if a couple kiss each other, they both look at each other and go, "Oh no, no, no!" So they cover their own eyes, and I think that's just instilled into them, because that was instilled into me as a kid.
Yeah, isn't it
Um,
weird? You reach a point where you almost become your parents. Like there's things I say things sometimes, and I go, "Oh God, I sound just like my dad."
yeah, I say the same. And I always say, I'm never going to be like you. I always say to my parents, whenever they gave me into trouble, I'd be like, I'll never do that with my kids. Never. And I
Yeah,
do it. And
yeah, and it's funny because they get the well. Not so clever now, are you? Moment.
Yeah. And they'll do the same with their kids. So it's just a never-ending cycle. So that was my 9th one. So we're moving on to your 9th.
This one isn't a PG.
Ooh.
It's not an 18, but it's not a PG. And this was the first movie that scared me as a teenager.
Right.
So this is the Blair Witch Project.
Okay.
And
Interesting one.
this scared me because I don't know how many people know, obviously you'll remember, but when this come out, this was kind of just pre the big boom of the internet.
Yeah.
So the internet was there, and there was AOL chat rooms was about as interesting as the internet got. And the hype behind this movie was real found footage.
Yeah.
This was a real thing. And I remember being so excited to watch this because I was really into horror at this point. And to have something that they marketed as real, and everyone believed this is real footage. They found it only last year, and these people went missing in the woods. That was such a clever sell, and one that will never ever happen again because the internet exists.
Yeah.
And going and watching this in a cinema with the belief that this was real is an experience like nothing else. When you thought this was real, all of the scares get you, all of the cracks, all of the branches breaking, every single bit of it is the most tense, nerve-wracking experience. And I feel privileged that I got it because that will never be replicated again.
Mhm.
And like there was a bit that it was a video that it wasn't even a video. It was on TV. It was on one of the news channels. I can't remember if it was BBC or ITV, but they played like an ad within the TV show where it was almost like a documentary about the footage, and they're interviewing people and they're like, oh yeah, we can't believe they found the footage in the hills. It's been so long. And you see that on the news, and then 2 nights later you watch that in the cinema. And then the way it ends and it just cuts off. I walked out of there traumatized. I remember where we lived to the cinema was like a 20-minute walk. There's like a little alleyway and you cut across a field. And when you get to the bit where you cut across a field, like friends would go that way, friends would go that way, and I was straight on. That walk across the field was so nerve-wracking. Like it's one of the few movies that when I watched it, it became real.
Yeah.
And
That was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a similar experience to you watching this film. Unfortunately for me, I didn't see it at the cinema, but by the time I saw it, I still thought it was real. I do remember watching the documentary, and it was on like a news channel.
Yeah.
I think it's available on YouTube now. It's like the Blair Witch documentary, but it was just made so real. Like if you didn't think it was real before it, you would believe it was real when you watch this documentary. And then luckily they released the documentary weeks before the movie came out. So it was still fresh in our minds that we were going to see this movie, almost like a snuff movie of these filmmakers whose information was changed on IMDb to missing or dead.
Yeah.
On IMDb, everything was on point. And like you said, advertising for a movie is never going to be as clever as it was with the Blair Witch Project. You're never going to get that again because you just can't replicate it. Now, what annoys me though is people watching this movie for the first time now and going, that was the worst found footage movie I've ever seen. We didn't see the witch. We didn't get an ending. And you're just like, maybe you're right, but you had to have been there back in 1999, being told that this was real life.
Yeah.
And then just feel like you're watching a snuff film. And like you said as well, you're not seeing much, but you've got a feeling that these people are screaming for a reason and it's real life. So they're scared. So I'm petrified and I'm so scared for them. That was it's not on the list, but it's probably the most scared I've been as a late teen, because the whole, I think it's the experience of the movie that's more frightening than the movie itself. If
Yeah,
you see what I mean. Yeah, totally agree though. That's one frightening movie that you won't understand unless you saw it at the time.
yeah.
Um,
I don't think there's any other movie I can think of that you could apply the same logic to.
nah.
There's no other movie that was scary if you watched it then, but really isn't scary if you watched it now. The Blair Witch is such an enigma, such a unique horror movie,
Mhm.
and it's still one of my favourites,
Same.
but it doesn't hold the same fear now that it did then. But
Yeah. I think once the gimmick is gone, once the genie's out the bottle, that it's not real. Then you understand that people might not like it as much as we like it, but because anytime I watch it, I still put my brain in that mode where this is real and this is how I felt when I watched it. I still love it. I still enjoy it. But yeah, I can see why people be like, nah, it's not for me, which is fine.
yeah,
You have to be there.
and it's still a scary concept now. Like going out into the woods, like I've been filming recently, and you go out into the woods at night.
Mhm.
It's a very scary process, and those actors would have been terrified.
Yeah,
If you're,
absolutely.
we filmed recently. We went, I don't know, quarter of a mile into the woods, and it was dusk, and we filmed into the evening. And there's sort of 4 or 5 people there, but when you have those quiet moments, and you do hear there's cracks in the distance, there's a deer just ambles past you, comes out of nowhere, scares the life out of you. That environment just breeds this tension and this sort of feeling in the pit of your stomach. And they manage to take that feeling that is real and get it across to an audience.
Yeah, it's a unique experience. Are you going to For the Love of Horror?
Yes, I am.
They're going there this year.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, yeah.
uh, high on my list.
Is Heather going?
Yes.
Yeah, well, if you can get all three, I'm sure. Are they
Yeah,
all
all 3 are there.
and the director's going as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that'd be some photograph to get
Yeah.
if you were going to do that. But yeah, so they're going. So it'll be interesting to see them.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see what they've got to say when they get up on a panel
Yeah.
about how it was, because there's loads of varying stories about how their experience was, from it being incredibly traumatic to them not being more than 20 foot away from a main road.
Yeah, I know. I know it'd be funny when I'm screaming, but I can see cars.
Yeah.
It's weird. No doubt there'll be someone in the crowd that'll go, "I thought you were dead."
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm going to go into my last one. Now, I had two in my mind. One of them's actually a PG, I believe, but the one I decided to go with is Candyman. Obviously, the original Candyman from '92. It's more similar to some of the ones on our lists. It's more about the concept of Candyman rather than Candyman itself. We were in school, and you would have the mirrors in the bathrooms, and you would say, "Look, Candyman, Candyman," and you say his name 5 times, and see what happens. It's almost like
Yeah.
saying Bloody Mary or doing a Ouija board when you're growing up. You just want to do things you're not supposed to do. And I think Candyman just got instilled in us as young kids, whether you've seen the movie or not, because I knew about Candyman before I saw the movie.
Yeah.
And I think because all my friends were talking about it, I had to watch it. And I was scared of Candyman, but I think I was more scared of the concept of Candyman rather than the movie itself. I do remember though, one of the scenes that scared me the most was a scene where Helen was in the parking lot and she was going to her car, and all you heard was Helen. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh my God, that's scary. So my mum saw that I got really scared at this part, and so did my sister. My sister's name's Kelly. And we were in a room after we watched Candyman, and my mum creeped the door open and she went, Kelly. and we were like, ah. So even my mum was playing on it as well. But yeah, I think the thought of Candyman, though, Oh, that was nuts. Did you see Candyman young?
Yeah, I did see Candyman young, and again, it was on the back of the kids in the school all saying Candyman, Candyman, Candyman in the mirror.
Mhm.
It was when it come out, because what was that? Was that 92?
Two. Yep.
92? Yeah, so the talk, when that come out, there was a couple of kids who saw it, and then they were talking about it. And it was one of those things that was portrayed through the school almost like an urban legend. It's like initially you didn't even know it was a movie.
Yeah.
It's just if you say Candyman in the mirror 5 times, someone comes and guts you. Do they?
Yeah.
And then as a kid, it's like, well, I'm going to go and try that because that
Yeah, of
sounds
course.
like
What could go wrong?
what could possibly go wrong? And yeah, then I think I watched that at like a cousin's house or a friend's house. I wasn't very old. It was not long after it come out.
Mhm.
The bit that scared me is the bees.
Yeah.
The bees, especially when they come out of the mouth. And the other bit was the apartment block. So when you go through and you see like the art on the wall, I found that whole apartment block really unnerving and like a
Yeah.
place that I wouldn't want to go near.
Hmm. Yeah, that was quite haunting. A fun, well, not a fun fact for me, but uh, after Candyman, Candyman came out in '92, and in 1995, I was hanging about with my friends, and we were climbing over this wall, and I remember jumping down, and I thought I stood on jagged nettles, like something jaggy. I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
what's that?" And I looked down, and there was a swarm of wasps, and
Oh no.
they were all stinging me. So I tried to run away, and I got so weak because they were stinging me, and I ended up just collapsing as they were still stinging me. And I remember waking up, and I saw a woman scooping me up, and then I fell back asleep or knocked myself out. And then I woke up in my mum's house, and I was like, "Oh, what happened?" And they said, "Oh, you've been stung with some wasps." So luckily my neighbour is a nurse, and she had a big massive jar of vinegar. So she put it in a bath for me. So I had a bath of vinegar, and they put me in the bath, and I was screaming because all these wasps were still stuck to me, and they're all
Oh wow.
falling off and stuff. And I still remember to this day, when I went to the hospital, they were keeping me. They had to keep me awake so they could ask me questions. But so to keep me awake, I was counting all the wee dots on my body, and I counted 87. I had 87 wasp stings.
Wow.
Um, so after that, luckily I wasn't allergic to wasps, otherwise I would have died. But after that, I watched Candyman again, even though it's bees and not wasps. I watched it again, and I was like, wow, this is traumatizing me in a completely
Yeah.
different way now. Never mind the Candyman in the mirror 5 times, never mind hell. And it was when the bees were coming. I was just almost like a PTSD. I'm like, oh my God, it's taking me back to the time I get stung with all these wasps. So that was a frightening experience, and for a completely different reason.
Yeah,
Nuts.
that's terrifying. I've been stung by a bee once, and honestly, I made such a fuss. That was not that I was an adult in a pub beer garden. I got stung by a bee, and I reacted like I'd been stabbed. I was like,
Yeah,
yeah, I don't do well with pain,
same.
not at all.
Um, David Diggs said, "You just described the plot to My Girl." Yeah, when I went back to school, I told people what happened, and they were all saying, "Oh, you're Macaulay Culkin from My Girl." I'm like, "Yeah, no, quite funny, but not." It was sore. So that was my traumatizing experience with Candyman. So, what's your last one on your list?
My last one is a movie that, again, this is another PG, and this is a movie that if you look at the cover, everyone will go, "Oh, that's really nice movie." This movie scared me in ways that I can't really explain, and even now I will not watch this movie because it just freaks me out.
I know what
And
it
it's
is.
go on, what do you think?
It's got to be. It's the one that I was thinking of that I was going to put in. Is it Return to Oz?
It is Return to Oz.
Yes, I knew it.
I still can't watch. I hate this movie with a passion. It traumatized, like everything in it. It's almost like someone went, what are the scariest things we could possibly get away with in a PG movie?
Mhm.
And then they crammed them all in to like a 30-minute section of this movie. You've got the Wheelers, the moose head on the bed, the clockwork guy, like everything in it is just designed to scare children. And it's
Yeah.
such a weird way to make a Wizard of Oz movie. It's just
Mhm.
bizarre.
Yeah, I don't know what they were thinking with that one either. Like, I remember being traumatized by this as a kid as well, thinking this is supposed to be like a sequel to The Wizard of Oz, which was so fluffy and fun. And this
Yeah.
is like, I can't watch this. This is too scary for me.
Yeah, it's really dark as well. Like
Mhm.
the overall tone of it, like everything in it is just, there's no sort of fluffy, light, singy, happy moments. Like you get that, like the first 3/4 of The Wizard of Oz is just pure joy.
Yeah.
But in this, it's like you get about 3 minutes of joy, and then it's just impending doom and peril
Yeah.
from that point on. And even when you get to the end, there's no kind of big, haha, we done it. Even the end's a bit like, is it done?
Mm.
I don't know if this is over. But the Wheelers were the ones that scared me the most.
Yeah.
They were awful.
The Wheeler scared me the most. I've not seen it in years. But yeah, it scarred me. The Wheelers were the worst part for me. I think what scared me about it was I was expecting something completely different. You know, I was expecting that fun film like that I saw in the original. But yeah, I don't know what they were thinking or who thought that this was going to be good for kids. And even when it was finished, and then we found that it wasn't good for kids, they still brought it out and made it a PG anyway, because technically it is a PG, but
Yeah.
don't know how, because they should have put in warnings and they didn't do that.
No, I mean even the characters. I think is his name Cogsworth, the big steel round,
The clock thing.
the clock guy. Even he is really nasty and aggressive to start with,
Hmm.
and he kind of warms up a bit later. But even when he's warmed up and he's meant to be an ally, he's still very. I don't know. He's got sort of the nasty granddad, gruff, just generally not a nice guy vibe to him.
Yeah.
And this poor girl is just traumatized by all of these people. And I lived that trauma with her, and it was a movie my sister loved. And I don't know if your house was like ours, but it was a case of whoever got home first from school
Yep.
kind of owned the TV for a certain amount of time every day.
Yeah. That was the same as.
That if she got home first, that was what went on, was Return to Oz, and I'd just go upstairs. It's like I can't watch this.
Yeah.
But she loved it. She loves that. Hates horror movies. I don't get it, but it was awful for me.
It's
I've
weird.
not watched it since.
It's weird how people can like disassociate the horror parts of that and
Hmm.
just look at the fun parts, because there is obviously fun parts, I guess, of the film, but it was so dark, and it's probably fitting for Fairuza Balk as well, because she was a kind of a dark actress, isn't she, like in The Craft? So there was always something about her that just felt like she shouldn't be playing Dorothy Gale. It is just feels like a dark version of a Wizard of Oz story, an extended Wizard of Oz story, just totally freaky. Ugh.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I'm not a fan. I think I need to put it on a watch list. I need to rewatch it because I've
same.
not. I think the last time I watched this, I must have been, I don't know, eight, 7, 8, and
Yeah.
I've not watched it since, and it stuck with me. I still remember the scenes that traumatized me from that movie, and because it stuck with me so long, it's like I don't want to watch it now.
Yeah.
I've got no desire to go back and relive that childhood trauma.
I'm going to do it, I think. I might even invite my kids to watch it as well. We'll have a nice family movie night and watch Return to Oz and see how they react to it as well. I'll obviously know that it's quite nuts, but I'll see how they react to it, if they reacted the same as me, because I was maybe about 10 or 11 the last time I seen it, so it's been a good 30 years, I'd say,
Yeah.
since I last seen the movie, and it's probably not going to hold up, and it probably won't scare me, but I'll probably see what I would have been scared of when I was young watching it back in the day. So, and I'm glad you put it on the list, because It was one I was toying with. If you didn't mention it, I probably would have said it at the end, because I think it's worth a mention, because I think it scared quite a lot of people growing up.
Yeah.
If you see online, a lot of people mention that movie, so it's a good one to add on there. So that's us come to the very end of what scared us as a kid. I've seen some of you guys were just having conversations amongst yourselves, which is absolutely fine. But yeah, I think we've got The Emperor Rises said the Wheelers and Mumby are pure nightmare fuel. Yeah, so I think a lot of people will agree that Return to Oz would have been one on there. David Diggs said, great list, fellas. I don't remember Return to Oz. The It miniseries was scary as a kid. Yeah, so that's one that I put on the list, because I think the ones that I put on there were probably your typical ones that you would have. And I'm glad that you've given your insight to some of your ones as well, Scott, because some of them I would have forgotten all about, like Poltergeist II, completely forgot all about that, even though it's a popular one. And obviously some of the PG ones as well, which is understandable because we're still young at the time. So we're watching the kind of young ones of that. Excuse me, sorry. Screenlight says, anyone ever check out Grave Dancers? Awesome horror flick. Used to frighten me as a kid. I think it was a part of those After Dark Film Fest releases back in the early 2000s. I've not seen that one, the early 2000s.
No, I haven't.
I think that's the one that's got, I can't remember his name. He plays Lincoln Burrows in Prison Break.
Okay. Yeah.
He plays Dracula in Blade Trinity. I'm sure he's in it. I've never seen that one. The only one I actually saw, which was actually decent, was a film called Husk. Have you heard of that?
I've heard of Husk. I have not seen it though.
It's about a scarecrow in the cornfield. It's actually really creepy one, because most of those After Dark films are quite cheap and quite frankly kind of boring. But that one was a good one, to be honest. Oh, sorry, I need to say this one because I forgot about this one. Nope, not that one. This one. The Emperor Rises says, Fire in the Sky was terrifying to me. They played it serious, like The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Have you seen Fire in the Sky?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it won't have the same impact now, but I think it came out in 93, and it's about an alien. Somebody gets abducted by an alien, and then they come back down, and then they give their account of what happened.
Oh, no, I have seen it. Is this the one where he basically he's talking through the abduction and talking through the things they've done to him, and you've got there's a scene in a bar.
Yep.
Where
yep.
Yeah, I have seen it. Yes, I have seen it.
Yeah, I think Kevin Bacon might be in it. I'm not 100%, but I'm sure he's in it. But that was a scary one. But obviously now it won't be as scary. But yeah, that is a scary one. Yeah, Dream Villain said Dominic Purcell. That's the guy who plays Lincoln Burrows, and he's in Grave Dancers. So yeah, he was in it as well. I think I've seen a few other ones that people mentioned. A lot of people were agreeing with you with the Blair Witch Project, which was again understandable. Blair Witch. David says, do you all remember Something Wicked This Way Comes? I do remember that one. Do you remember that one, Scott?
No.
I think it's about a circus that comes to town or something like that. Jonathan Pryce plays like the main circus guy. It almost feels like an episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark or Goosebumps or something like that.
Oh, okay.
It's an old Disney one. It was, again, I think it's a PG, quite tame now, but back in the day it was quite scary as well.
PGs in the 80s were another level.
Oh, the 80s, there was no rules really, was there? It's just kind of like, here's a movie. If we think kids can watch it, we'll slap a PG on it, and that's it. The BBFC got really strict after the whole Margaret Thatcher era, the video nasties.
Yeah.
And then I believe around about 2000, 2001, the guy who owned or run the BBFC died, and they rejigged everything. So a lot of things were getting released now, like The Last House on the Left, I Spit on Your Grave. They were all getting re-rated and released because they were all X-rated or banned. And they decided, you know what? Let people see them because they're going to see them anyway. So I'm kind of glad that they changed that up. David says, The Never-Ending Story had some scary moments. I was scared. Well, I wasn't scared, but I was crying when, what was the horse's name? The horse gets stuck in the mud.
Yeah, it's pretty early on, isn't it? They get stuck in the manage. Yeah, it's not.
It's
The
kind of like,
Never another series of movies that were nightmare fuel.
yeah, I think it's because a lot of it was practical, very magical and mystical as well. And you get taken to that land, didn't you? Like when you were watching it, you felt like you were with them. Artax, that was the horse's name. Oh, sorry, no, not Artax. Altria. Was it Artax or Altria? Can't remember.
No,
But anyway, that was a sad moment. Very sad. What was this? The Emperor Rises says, "You know what's a funny one? That one scene from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. You know the one. Is that the what was that scene again? I remember being scared of Who Framed Roger Rabbit as
It's
well.
where he dips the shoes in the acid. It's my mind's gone, but Christopher Lloyd.
Christopher Lloyd, yeah.
When he does dunks the shoe, the shoes, the cartoon shoe is dying and crying. That's very sad.
All right, okay.
Again, another movie that should never have been shown to children.
Well, I know, but I think there was a scene where he becomes, I think he gets flattened, and then he becomes the cartoon.
Yeah,
with his big eyes and stuff. That was a scary bit as well for me. But again, that wasn't even a horror, but that kind of had a lasting impression on me as well. So Boogeyman Voorhees says that Artreyu was the boy, Artax was the horse. Yeah, I knew it was something like that anyway. Anyway, so we've come to the end of the live stream. We're almost at 2 hours there. I don't want to keep you as well, Scott, and then I need to see to my kids, make sure they're not fighting as well. I don't know.
Okay.
Your kids will all be in their bed anyway, won't they?
Yeah, the younger ones are. The older two have just got in from work. So.
Oh well, lucky you.
Yeah.
Lucky you. But thanks for coming on, Scott. I loved hearing all the movies that you mentioned that scared you. It kind of brought back memories for me, whether they were good or bad. They still brought back memories as well. And it was obviously an honour having you on the show. For those of you who don't know, guys, Scott and his friend Mark run a podcast called the You Run Podcast. And I listen to it on Spotify. I don't know where else. Where else can we find you, Scott?
The podcast's available everywhere, Spotify, Apple, wherever you can get podcasts. We've got a true crime podcast as well that I do with Heather. On every social media at You Run Podcast, including YouTube, where we do various other videos. I've just released a Stu Marker video, which will upset quite a few people.
I like the sound of that.
But yeah, we're pretty much everywhere at You Run Podcast. Put that into any social media, you'll find us. Put it into any podcast service, and you'll find us. And thank you so much for having me on. I've followed your channel for quite a while, and despite my co-host best efforts to call you Dave McRae, I'm finally happy to be here. Thank you.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, well, I'm glad that I spoke to Mark anyway, because it was last year. I remember just being at the bar, and he's like, "Oh, hey, you're Dave." I'm like, "No, wrong person." He's like, "Yeah, you're Dave McRae." I'm like, "No, I'm not Dave McRae." And then I went away, and the look on his face, he was like, "Why is he lying to me? I know he's Dave McRae." And then I saw him later on. He's like, "Dave, well, I know it's you." I'm like, "No, Dave's Canadian. My name's Barry from Wolfman's Got Nards." He's like, "Oh yeah." I think he might have been drunk at the time. I don't know, but it was really funny.
It is one of the funniest. I still give him grief about it now. He's like, I know it is, because he came over to me. He's like, I don't understand why he's lying. I don't get it. And I knew who you were, and I was like, well, I don't know. He's like, I'm going to go talk to him again. I was like, okay then.
Is he coming this year as well?
Yeah, we'll both be there this year.
Right. Well, I'll need to make sure I come and chat to you guys, and hopefully he knows my name this time.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed. You never know. He might be drunk and you still think I'm Dave. I'll put on a Canadian accent for him. So what I'm going to do as well, Scott, is I'll leave, once this video's finished processing, I'll put a link down below to your channel as well. So if anyone's watching just now, then the link will be down below. For anyone watching after the fact, then the links are down below to Scott's channel. Great stuff from you as well, Scott. I listen to your stuff all the time. When I'm in work, there's certain things I do at work in certain rooms where I'm just myself. So what I do is I stick my earphones on and just listen to your stuff over and over again. It's brilliant. And that's why I've asked you on the channel, because I love all your stuff anyway. So it's good to have you on and getting your insight on all your horror knowledge as well.
Well, thank you very much. I didn't really cover much horror today, though. I stuck with
Well,
the PG, but thank you. Honestly, thank you. And thank you for listening as well. I get real joy out of people who comment when they listen. And you're one that will jump on X and go, I am screaming now because I know the answer to the quiz, and it's driving me mad that the person there doesn't. And I get a kick out of that. I get a kick out of people going, I really like what you do. I find it entertaining. And I'll be honest, I get a kick out of the people who don't enjoy it as well.
Yeah,
the ones who go, I don't like what you said about that movie. Like, okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Glad you disagree.
Yeah, well, that's it. If everyone agreed, it'd be boring. There was one I listened to on yours where you were doing a quiz, and the question, like you play a bit of the movie, and it was I want to play a game. And then the girl that you were doing the quiz with, she said, oh, I know it's Hellraiser, but I don't know what one it is. I'm like, it's not Hellraiser. It's not Hellraiser. And then you gave her a few clues, and then it turned out to be Saw 2, I think the answer was. I'm like, it's Saw. But she's like, no, it's Hellraiser. I know it's Hellraiser. I'm like, no.
It's so funny because we'll get some people who, like, we recorded an episode last night, and I won't give anything away, but we gave the question and the person answered instantly. And it was a multiple choice, but like, well, hold on, it's multiple choice. They're like, I don't need the multiple choice. Like, well, game over.
Did they lose?
Yeah, they lost. They got it wrong. But they were so convinced that they knew. I know what that is. I don't need any help. I don't need the multiple choice. But okay, that's fine by us.
Oh well, that's a shame. Right, I'll not keep you any longer, Scott. Like I said, guys, all the information will be down below. Thanks a lot for watching, you guys. If you stay with me just for 2 minutes, Scott, will I say goodbye to everybody else? But thanks a lot for watching, guys. Thanks for subscribing, and I'll see you soon, okay? Bye-bye.
See you later.